Welcome to Israel Now News. I'm Yochanan El-Rom.
And I'm Erin Viner.
In our top story, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has called on his coalition partners to remain unified and stand strong in the aftermath of recent Hamas attacks. During a televised address to the nation, the premier also revealed that he has a clear plan to contend with security challenges that lie ahead, including possible Israeli military action against its enemies. Earlier in the week, he assumed the defense portfolio following the departure of Minister Avigdor Lieberman from the government. Netanyahu, who is currently serving an unprecedented fourth term in office, stressed that he has risked his life time after time to safeguard our lives here in the land of Israel.
A religious Jewish candidate has run the runoff election to become the next mayor of Jerusalem. Moshe Leon defeated his secular competitor in the second round of the balloting after neither had garnered enough votes in the initial five-candidate contest 3 weeks ago to establish an outright victory. The new 57-year-old mayor previously served as a member of the Jerusalem City Council. He was also the Director General of the Prime Minister's Office, Chairman of the Jerusalem Development Authority, and head of Israel Railways. During his military service, Leon was a chaplain who sang with the Israel Defense Force Rabbinical Choir. He's still a cantor who recently performed services at different synagogues each week in the Holy City.
Islamist leaders in Gaza have been sending unambiguous messages that they have no intention of ever reaching a peaceful resolution with Israel. Hamas chief Yahya Sinwar brandished a gun during a fiery speech at a memorial service for extremists killed in recent clashes with IDF forces as he proclaimed the terror group's hands remain on the trigger. The terrorist boss then boasted that Hamas has expanded its arsenal of weapons to include more precise missiles and threatened to strike the major population center of Greater Tel Aviv in any future conflict.
The Muslim-majority nation of Malaysia is threatening Australia over Canberra's possible relocation of its embassy to Jerusalem. Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison proposed the move during a local election campaign last month. And now his Malaysian counterpart, Mahathir Mohamad, accused Morrison of adding to the cause for terrorism. Mohamad issued the inflammatory charges during a bilateral meeting in Singapore on the sidelines of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations Summit. Australia's Treasurer Josh Frydenberg responded that the Malaysian Premier has a history of making anti-Jewish statements.
Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu announced that Israel is now negotiating the extension of its 25-year lease of borderland with Jordan in accordance with the 1994 peace treaty between the two nations. As we reported previously, Amman took Jerusalem by surprise with its unexpected declaration that the Hashemite kingdom intended to renege on the lease of the agricultural land in the desert to the south, as well as a small tract of land known as the Island of Peace near the Sea of Galilee. The loss of the fields would severely impact Israeli farmers in the Jordan River Valley, which is known as Naharaim in Hebrew. It was the scene of a shooting in 1997 when a Jordanian soldier murdered 7 Israeli schoolgirls. Israeli citizens' ownership rights in the territory date back to the 1920s when Russian Jewish engineer Pinchas Rutenberg obtained a concession from colonial Britain to build a hydroelectric plant whose abandoned structures are still standing. The Farsi language branch of the U.S. government-funded Radio Liberty is reporting that Iranian citizens have been taking to the streets in cities and towns across their country in anti-government demonstrations over unpaid wages, the lack of clean drinking water, and unequal water distribution. According to Radio Farda, laborers have been shouting, "They lie and say America is our enemy, but our enemy is right here." The protests come as the economy in the rogue Islamic Republic has been hard hit by sanctions reimposed by Washington after the Trump administration withdrew from the 2016 nuclear deal in May.
Kentucky has just become the 26th U.S. state to pass legislation against the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement. As he signed the executive order, Republican Governor Matt Bevin said that it is abundantly clear that his state condemns BDS and that we stand shoulder to shoulder with our friend Israel. The new law recognizes Israel as a critical and invaluable ally whose sovereignty and security has been unfairly targeted by discriminatory campaigns which only serve to inflame conflict. The new measure also highlighted the nearly $85 million in bilateral trade that the Bluegrass State conducts with the Blue Star State of the Jewish people.
And there is increasing concern in Minnesota after newly elected Democratic Congresswoman Ilhan Omar has come out in favor of BDS in a complete turnabout from her platform ahead of the balloting. During her campaign, Omar told constituents that boycotting was counterproductive and prevented dialogue. She now admits that it was not politically expedient to air her true views. Omar is one of the first 2 Muslim women to be elected to the House. The incoming lawmaker is now being accused of intentionally misleading the voters in her district in a bid to achieve power.
A 150-year-old Torah scroll has been discovered in the former Jewish ghetto of Lodz, Poland. The holy parchment was carefully hidden within the wall of a wooden shack that housed 164,000 Jews before they were deported to the death camps. Polish authorities inspected the structure ahead of a planned destruction of the ghetto's remains. The scroll was presented to Rabbi Avraham Krieger, who heads the Shem Olam Holocaust Institute in Israel. The rabbi has lamented Poland's lack of respect for Jewish history, saying that the demolition of these lone wooden shacks in the Lodz ghetto would erase the only evidence of what happened there during the Holocaust.
A 95-year-old German is now on trial for Nazi crimes in what is likely to be one of the last proceedings of its kind. The hearing opened at the start of the month in the northwestern city of Münster and is scheduled to continue into next year. Documents prove the accused, who cannot be named for legal reasons, not only volunteered to join the dreaded SS, but he also expressed willingness to work at concentration camps. Prosecutors charge he assisted in the murder of hundreds of people between 1942 and 1944 while serving at the Stutthof camp near what is now the Polish city of Gdansk. The suspect could face up to 10 years behind bars if convicted.
A 1922 letter written by Albert Einstein was just purchased by an unidentified bidder at an Israeli auction for $32,000. The artifact is considered remarkable because the world-famous Jewish physicist confided his fears over the rise of anti-Semitism in Germany more than a decade before the Nazis took power. At that time, the 43-year-old scientist wrote to his sister Maria about politically dark times and that he was doing quite well in spite of all the anti-Semites among his German colleagues. Einstein, who went on to win the Nobel Prize just 3 months later, had departed Berlin after far-rightists assassinated his friend and fellow Jew, Foreign Minister Walter Rathenau, which prompted police to warn him that he could be next. When the Nazis took over Germany in 1933, they launched a campaign of anti-Jewish persecution that would culminate in the Holocaust.
Never before have American Jews found themselves so dramatically attacked as they were when 11 worshipers were murdered during the October 27th mass shooting at the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh. Many think the only response is to now be ready for anything. Some are signing up at facilities like the Charev Gidon Israeli Tactical Defense Academy near Scranton, Pennsylvania, where a one-day firearms course is offered by its director, Yonatan Stern, who is a veteran IDF officer. The expression of interest by hundreds of prospective students marks an all-time high since the academy was founded 6 years ago. The spike in demand follows U.S. President Donald Trump's statement that the shooting might have been prevented if the House of Worship had employed an armed guard.
Israel has always been a world leader in applying high-tech solutions to wide-ranging challenges, and now the nation's attention is turning to the Sea of Galilee. Drought and overpumping have depleted the biblical lake, which has diminished the shimmering tourist landmark that rivals Jerusalem as a draw for Christian pilgrims, given the gospel accounts of Jesus' miracles around its northern shores. The erosion also imperils the country's biggest freshwater reservoir, and the shortfall in vital runoff starves the downstream River Jordan and the Dead Sea. The Israeli government has already approved a $622 million project to funnel 120 million cubic meters of desalinated Mediterranean seawater 47 miles overland through a new pipeline network to the Galilee starting next year. Energy Resources and Water Minister Yuval Steinitz is now also proposing that amount be nearly tripled to 300 million cubic meters when the cabinet votes on the issue next month. Such a capacity would entirely replenish the Sea of Galilee by the year 2026.
Here's a cute story that we warn you may tickle your taste buds and leave your stomach growling. One enterprising couple of Israeli restaurateurs in Rishon LeZion outside of Tel Aviv have created a cross between a Belgian waffle and the Middle East falafel sandwich that has customers literally lining up out the door. Tali Shemtov and her husband Almog dish out chickpea paste that has been baked to form a pita bread-like pocket for vegetables and sauces. And they say their product meets the needs of an increasingly health-conscious clientele by eliminating the sugars of regular pita as well as the oil used to fry traditional falafel balls.
The annual bicycle ride aimed at raising money for Israel's leading pediatric rehabilitation hospital, Alim, just surpassed all previous amounts with $3,517,634 of donations. The 5-day cycling tour has reverently been nicknamed the Wheels of Love. Alim is a nonprofit medical center founded 85 years ago to help sick children recover as quickly as possible. 600 cyclists took part in this year's event, with many flying in from abroad. Celebrity well-wishers included Madonna, Cher, Michael Bublé, and Kathleen Turner. Hospital Director Dr. Maurit Be'eri said that the contributions enabled treatment beyond that which is covered by the national healthcare system. Every penny goes to providing additional therapists, a wider selection of emotional support modalities, innovative interdisciplinary projects, and greater hands-on care. That concludes the news portion of our show. Stay tuned for Ask the Source with Josh Reinstein.
Hello and welcome to Ask the Source. I'm your host Josh Reinstein, and we're here on a beautiful sunny day in Jerusalem on our rooftop studio. My guest today is Laura Ben-David. She's the Director of Marketing for Shevei Israel. Laura, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Tell our viewers a little about what is Shevei Israel.
So Shevei Israel works with lost and hidden Jews, people who have been basically disconnected from the Jewish people for no fault of their own, and to help them return in any way they wish to.
So one of the big successes of Shevei Israel is the coming of the Bnei Menashe, the sons of Manasseh. Can you tell us about that?
Sure, absolutely. So the Bnei Menashe are, as you said, the sons of Menashe, one of the 10 tribes, one of the 10 lost tribes of Israel, who were lost 2,700 years ago in the exile of the Assyrian Empire, that they sent the 10 tribes away from the rest of the Jewish people. And this group of people have been found in northeast India. And there are about 10,000 of them, 3,000 who we have already helped to return to Israel, and we're hoping to bring the other 7,000 back as well.
This is fascinating. You know, there were 12 tribes of Israel, 10 were lost. Who else are you finding other than the sons of Manasseh?
So we work with people who have been separated from the Jewish people through no fault of their own. So some of them are like the Bnei Menashe, lost tribes, and others are, for example, like the hidden Jews of the Holocaust, which is something much more recent. Those Jews who returned to Poland, for example, after the war and hid their Jewishness, and now, after 70 years, don't want their secret to die with them and are telling their children about this, and the children don't know what to do with this information, so we help them.
I also read that Shevei Israel is working in China with the Kai Feng, which is a sect of Chinese Jews. Can you tell us a little about that?
Absolutely. The Chinese Jews date back about 1,000 years, and they basically, it was merchants that made their way over to China, settled there, and the community was about 5,000 strong at its height, and now there are about between 500 and 1,000 left, and it's not so easy for them there in China, and we're helping some of them return as well.
You're no stranger to the work of Aliyah. You were the first Oleh to come with Nefesh B'Nefesh, the organization that brings American Jews back home to Israel. How was that experience for you, making Aliyah and coming here with Nefesh B'Nefesh?
Really, it was absolutely incredible, and it sort of it took my life in the path that it went, because I was a nurse before I made Aliyah, but making Aliyah with Nefesh B'Nefesh and part of that whole experience, I mean, I love Israel so much, and it really it directed me towards this path of promoting Israel, advocating for Aliyah, and I even became a writer and a photographer as a way of expressing that love for Israel.
A lot of Americans who come to Israel, they move to what is called Gush Etzion, to the Gush, Judea and Samaria areas as well. What was it like to be, as they call, a settler, but actually coming home and reestablishing your community in those areas?
Yeah, so the truth is that when we chose the community to live in, we were totally not political. It was not, it wasn't a thought at all. We just were looking for a nice place to raise our children, a place with, a nice view, good weather. We found Gush Etzion. It's very beautiful. We have all those things that I mentioned, great schools, and it's close to Jerusalem. We love it, and we never thought twice about the fact that we chose a place like that, despite all the questions and people talk about it, but really it's just such a special place to live.
One of the big questions that I get is about why aren't American Jews more than moving to Israel? I mean, there's still over 5 million Jews in America today. Well, what's holding them back?
That's a good question. I think that, a lot of people, despite the dream to return to Zion, many people who have made Aliyah over the years have moved because they needed to, because of difficulties where they were. And Americans are very comfortable. We were also very, very comfortable, and I think it takes not just strong Zionism, but also kind of a leap of faith to come to another country and start again. So it's not so easy, and people need to feel that, I guess, that motivation. But they are coming. The truth is, since Nefesh B'Nefesh started, the numbers have risen to, an unprecedented amount. So they are coming.
So what do you think is the future of Aliyah from the United States? Do you think it's going to grow in leaps and bounds, or do you think it will be trickling in throughout the years?
It's hard to say. I think that, a lot of what's happening on the ground in America is going to dictate what's going to be in terms of Aliyah. Because people, they watch what's happening and they see, when things get difficult and politics are challenging, when anti-Semitism is on the rise, and that does definitely push people to think more about the alternative, which is, of course, a great alternative. But it's really, really hard to say. I don't think it will be a trickle. I think it will continue to be steady as it's been, not in massive numbers, but I don't think it's going to slow down.
One of the things you mentioned is that you're actually a writer and photographer. Why is it important to use other mediums to talk about what's happening here in Israel?
What I realized is that I have an opportunity to share the stories of Israel. And it's something that, I see things, I experience things, and I can take it for granted or not. And by taking pictures, by sharing them, by writing articles, I have this opportunity to give people anywhere in the world a view, an insight into what Israel is like, into the land, the beauty, the politics, the people, whatever it is that I'm sharing. And it's a privilege. It's a privilege for me to be able to do that. I have the opportunity, and I take advantage of it.
You recently just did an exhibit of photos of the pictures of the new immigrants from B'nai Manasseh, from the sons of Manasseh. What impact did that have on the community?
Well, the truth is that the exhibit just went live last week. I'm very close with people in B'nai Manasseh. I traveled to India. I escorted a group of them on their aliyah to Israel, their immigration to Israel. And they're really happy. They're very, very excited because they feel that somebody cares. People care. Shavei Israel cares. I care. And they're recognizing that people are starting to talk about their story and talk about their aliyah and understand how important it is to help them return. It's not something we could take for granted. They're not just able to show up. We have to help them. We have to bring them. So they, it's very heartwarming for them to see that.
Laura, there are literally tens of millions of people watching this show. What message do you have for our viewing audience?
I think that the most important thing is for people to understand Israel is a dynamic country. It's rich. It's something that there's so much going on. It's not just what you see in the news. Come to visit, experience it. Come visit the B'nai Manasseh and all these people and show them how much you care. And really just take the time to show your love for Israel.
Thank you, Laura, for being on the show, and thank you for tuning in to Ask the Source. I'm your host, Josh Reinstein. Now back to the studio.
Up next, the return to Zion with Karen Hayesod.
Shalom and welcome to the Return to Zion with Keren HaYesod. I'm Eliezer Moody Sandberg, World Chairman of Keren HaYesod United Israel Appeal, the leading official fundraising organization for the State of Israel. Today, you will witness the fulfillment of biblical prophecy through the gathering of the exiles. God bless you from Jerusalem.
Despite enduring thousands of years of danger and persecution, the Jewish people never lost the heartfelt dream of returning home to the eternal city of Jerusalem, to the land of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, to King David's capital. Scattered across the four corners of the earth, Jerusalem continued to beat relentlessly in the heart of every Jew. Through the darkest of days, the dream remained to see Jeremiah's prophecy come to life. There is hope for your future. Your children will return to their borders. And 50 years ago, the impossible happened. Exiled, dispersed, and downtrodden for generations, the Jewish people finally returned to Jerusalem. Faced with the might of multiple Arab armies, Israel's soldiers plucked victory from the jaws of tragedy. Finally, Jews could walk in the footsteps of their biblical forefathers and touch the stones of the Western Wall once more. In the 5 decades since then, Jerusalem has become a city transformed. From the rubble of war, a modern, high-tech metropolis has been built. A political capital and a cultural capital has blossomed. New neighborhoods continue to be built, while cutting-edge medical centers, universities, and research hubs lead the world. And all the time, a heavenly tranquility can be felt as the faithful of 3 religions worship, live, and play in freedom. Jews continue today to flock to Jerusalem to witness and live this modern-day miracle. They arrive from the 4 corners of the earth to experience a Jerusalem which their ancestors could not possibly have imagined. Soon, the Jews of Israel will outnumber those living in the rest of the world for the first time in 2 millennia. With the help of Keren HaYesod supporters, they are making new lives in the land of Israel. The Jewish people are truly coming home. They are part of a thriving, dynamic city. A city which stands at the crossroads of the past and the future, the ancient and the modern, where thousands of years of history blend seamlessly with the promise of a better, brighter tomorrow. Thus says the Lord God, Behold, I will lift up my hand to the nations and set up my standard to the peoples, and they will bring your sons in their bosom, and your daughters will be carried on their shoulders.
We've been praying to return home, to be back in the promised land. And we are here in Israel with the new Olim, with the new immigrants who arrived to Israel. This is the moment of the fulfillment of the biblical prophecies. It is happening as we speak around me. God bless Israel. God bless you. Thank you very much for your kind support, bringing the Jewish people back home and fulfilling the biblical prophecies.
To this day, Keren HaYesod is helping Jews around the world come home with the help of Jews and non-Jews alike. But the mission is not yet complete. Jerusalem continues to develop, to strive for greater prosperity. Ethiopian Jews continue to arrive, facing the difficult challenge of absorption. The possibilities for this special city, with this special community at its heart, are endless. And together, we can write the next chapter in a history like no other.
This is your last chance to donate before the end of the year and receive your holiday blessing from Jerusalem.
Come join Keren HaYesod in fulfilling biblical prophecy. Let's bless Israel together.
To donate and get information, call us at 1-800-505-1665 or visit our website at www.khisrael.org.
The recent midterm elections for the U.S. Congress have been the most high-profile and contentious elections in modern memory. In contrast to previous midterm elections, when there was a turnover between the Republicans and the Democrats, usually is over issues like war, such as in 2006 during the Bush administration, or the economy, as it was in 2010 during the Obama administration. But now, in 2018, the United States was neither at war nor in the midst of an economic crisis. And yet these midterm elections became the most high-profile and hotly contested elections ever. In fact, more Americans voted in the midterm elections than voted in the presidential elections of 2016. Now, what does this mean for Israel? There was no tremendous surprises. Perhaps the Republicans received a larger majority in the Senate than anticipated, and the Democrats a smaller majority in the Congress than anticipated. But for Israel, what this means is, that the president now will focus increasingly on foreign affairs. Under the U.S. Constitution, the president enjoys almost unlimited maneuverability only in one area, and that is in foreign affairs. And the president has spoken repeatedly about his desire to achieve what he calls the deal of the century, bringing about peace between Israel and the Palestinians. He's focused on that deal in the past. I think now he will focus with greater intensity because his path to moving domestic legislation will be essentially blocked by the Democratic majority in the Congress. Another outcome of the election, which may prove difficult for Israel and our allies in the United States, is the deepening polarization between Democrats and Republicans over the Israel issue. It's important to look not just at the cold statistics of which party won, but who won. And you'll see that on both the Republican and Democratic side, particularly on the Democratic side, more radicals have been elected, and their positions on Israel have deepened that polarization and made it much more difficult to maintain the bipartisan support which is essential for Israel's security.
And that's going to do it for this edition of Israel Now News. I'm Yochanan Elron.
And I'm Erin Viner reporting from our studio in Jerusalem. Please join us again next week for all of your Israel updates.